Welcome to the deep dive. We like to take you, well, kind of below the surface. And today, we're going deep with Exodus 3:14.
The I am who I am verse, right.
That's the one. But we're going beyond the usual Sunday school stuff today.
Oh, yeah, definitely. We've got some insights from pastors, real pastors, showing how they turned this familiar verse into, sermons that really make you think.
So if you're listening, you're probably looking for fresh ways to approach this passage, maybe for your own teaching or preaching.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting is how, two different pastors can take the same verse and come up with totally different sermons.
Okay, that's got my attention.
Yeah, one of them used Exodus 3:14 to jump into this whole discussion about the Trinity.
The Trinity, huh? That's a big one.
Yeah, it is. And the other focused more on what it means to personally encounter Jesus.
Okay, so two very different angles. Let's start with that first one, the Trinity. How did this pastor connect that to Exodus 3:14?
This sermon, it was from Bible Project. They get pretty deep, theologically speaking. But to explain the Trinity, they use this analogy of a 3D object passing through a 2D plane.
Okay, I think I get that. Like, imagine a sphere going through a flat sheet of paper.
Right, exactly. You would only see a circle on the paper, right?
Yeah.
Even though, in reality, the sphere is so much more than that.
Yeah. You just see a cross-section. So how does that relate to the Trinity?
Well, the idea is that, we as humans, we're limited. We can only see, facets of God at a time.
Kind of like how that 2D being would only see a slice of the 3D object.
Exactly. We might experience God's justice one day and then his mercy another day, but it's all part of the same whole, the same God.
So is the idea that, each attribute of God is a different slice of this 3D object?
That's kind of how they put it. And they suggest that even this I am statement all the way back in Exodus, it hints at this idea of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit being distinct but also unified.
So they see I am as more than just a name, but like a declaration of God's multifaceted nature.
That's their take. But then we have this other sermon from Epworth UMC that goes in a completely different direction. They focused on that story of Jesus and the Samaritan woman at the well.
Now, how does that tie back to Exodus 3:14?
Well, you got to remember, Jesus actually uses the phrase I am when he's talking to her. And to really appreciate the weight of that, we need to think about the historical context.
Good point. The whole Jewish Samaritan tension back then, they weren't exactly best buds.
No, not at all. There's a ton of prejudice and animosity. So for Jesus to use that divine name, the name revealed to Moses at the burning bush when talking to this woman, it was a really big deal.
It's like he's deliberately connecting himself back to that Old Testament revelation. And by doing that, he's breaking down barriers and revealing his own divine identity.
Exactly. It shows this amazing continuity of God's self-revelation throughout the whole Bible.
From Moses at the burning bush to Jesus at the well, it's the same I am, reaching out, making himself known.
It's really powerful when you think about it that way. So we've got these two very different sermons, one focusing on the theological meaning of I am, and the other on the personal impact of encountering Jesus.
It almost makes you wonder, what does I am actually mean? What are we really supposed to take away from this?
That is the big question, isn't it? And actually, both sermons have some really interesting answers. Yeah, so digging into what these pastors are saying, the Bible Project sermon, they were all about God's attributes. I am sums up God's power, love, faithfulness, all the things that make him, God.
Right, I am is the whole package of God's being.
Exactly. But the Epworth UMC sermon, they went a more personal route.
Instead of trying to put God in a box, they focused on what happens when you actually bump into this I am.
Yeah, that was their thing. For the Samaritan woman, that whole encounter with Jesus, it turned her world upside down.
Well, in Jesus, he really messed with the social norms of the day.
Big time. And he's offering her, living water and telling her she's loved and accepted by God despite everything. It's huge.
It is. And I think that's so important for, pastors and teachers,
Oh, for sure.
Because it takes this massive, almost untouchable idea of I am and makes it real, something people can connect with.
Absolutely. It's not just about knowing stuff. It's about, feeling it, feeling the impact of running into this I am. And that can change everything.
And challenge us too, right?
Yeah, totally. It makes us see ourselves and, everyone differently. God sees them.
This is great, but I'm also thinking, okay, we have these two sermons, both awesome. But how do we actually use this stuff? If I'm prepping a sermon on Exodus 3:14, What do I actually do with these ideas?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Well, one thing that really stuck with me from that Epworth UMC sermon was how important context is. Like, they really drove home how that tension between the Jews and Samaritans made Jesus's words hit even harder.
So don't just throw the verse out there.
Yeah.
Give people the backstory.
Exactly. Talk about what was going on in Moses' life, the whole Israelite situation, and how this I am thing fits in.
So you're adding layers, like not just explaining the words, but why those words mattered so much back then.
Exactly. And then you can tie that into how it matters to us now. And the other thing is, it can't just be, head knowledge. Got to reach people's hearts, too.
Right. Make it real. Because, I mean, running into the I am, it's supposed to shake things up.
Totally. Maybe you share some stories, or use illustrations. You could even use that 3D analogy from the Bible Project sermon. Make it something people can grasp.
Right. Make it come alive.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, our job as, pastors and Bible study leaders is to create space for people to actually meet the I am.
Exactly. The expert in that Epworth UMC sermon, he also had this great point about, not shying away from the tough questions.
Oh, yeah. Like, what does it even mean to be made in the image of I am? How does that change how we see ourselves?
Yeah.
What's our purpose supposed to be?
Yeah, those are the questions that can really get people thinking. And what's cool is that both sermons, even though they took different paths, they ended up pointing to the same thing. This I am isn't just a name, a definition. It's like a living, breathing reality that changes our lives.
It's almost like we're holding two totally different ideas at the same time. God never changes.
Right.
But we're supposed to be changing, transforming.
And that tension, I think that's where the magic happens.
Totally. Because if God is really the I am, always there, always active, then that means we never stay the same. We're always becoming more, getting closer to him. It really is amazing, though, how much you can get out of just one verse, right?
I know, right?
Like we've gone from the Trinity to encountering Jesus, all starting with those three little words. And what gets me is, both those sermons we talked about, they both kind of end up in the same place.
Yeah, it all points back to who God is, this incredible power and mystery.
And this idea that I am, those two words, they tell us God doesn't change, but they also call us to change. It's kind of wild.
It is. It's like a paradox almost. And I think that's why this verse, Exodus 3:14, it's just so powerful.
I think it makes you think, right? It's not just a definition. It's
yeah.
How do we wrap our minds around a God who is the I am, the always present, the source of everything?
It's a big one.
Yeah.
And for our listeners, the pastors, the teachers, it's their job to take this ancient verse and help people actually get it, make it real in their lives.
It's a challenge. But I think those sermons, they gave us some good tools.
For sure.
I love that idea of I am being like an action word, like a force that's always moving, always working. So it's not just, okay, I know about God. It's how am I a part of what God's doing? How am I changing because of him?
That's it, yeah. And I think for our listeners, maybe the most important thing they can do is, get people asking the tough questions. Like, what does it even mean to be made in the image of this I am? How does that change who we are? What are we here for?
Those are the questions that really make you stop and think. And, we've talked about a lot today, but I think what we keep coming back to is this. Exodus 3:14, it's not just about believing stuff. It's about getting up and doing something. It's about showing who God is right here, right now, in everything we do.
Yeah, it's like embodying I am.
Exactly. And that's a pretty incredible thing to think about. So as you go back to your churches, your communities, I hope you take this challenge with you. Don't let Exodus 3:14 just be another verse you know. Let it change how you think, how you live. Let it be a fire that gets you moving.
It's about living out the truth of who God is in every way possible.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Exodus 3:14. Hope you got something out of it. We'll see you next time.